This is a material called marabou, and we've used, I don't know if we've used it before or not. We did for the marabou jig, but this material, it comes off of the breast of a turkey, and this forms the tail of your fly, okay? And especially when we get to the ornament stage next week, if your tail is disproportionately long, it's not going to hang inside the globe correctly. The tail should be about the length of the hook shaft. And what I do, when we go to the high school kids have a big problem too. I try to come up with something that tells me what the length of that hook shaft is. And for me, if I can show this or not, my little finger is about the width of the hook shaft. So I want something hanging behind it not much longer than that. So keep that in mind. This fly uses several materials and it has multiple steps. So let me tie one and then I'll go back and tie another one, and we'll take it really slow for those that have not tied one before. I use, depending on how fast the water is, I use 20/100 lead. This is a nymph fly. It's a sinker. And I put, I don't know, I don't count. If I have a really fast water, I would probably use 25/100. I'd use a little bit heavier lead. But I put, I don't know, 10, 12 wraps. I'll break that off. Get rid of that little pigtail at the end. And I don't want to crowd the eye. I'm going to save a little space. I'm going to move this up a little bit closer now so you get a little bit better feel for it. And on this fly, black thread works fine. So I've got some black thread here. And I'm going to start behind the lead, make sure I got my thread attached, go through my lead, go up. I'm going to leave some space for the eye, make a little dam so for sure that lead is going to go nowhere, and then I'm going to end up with my thread hanging right above where the barb would be on the fly. Okay. Now, first thing we're going to tie on is the marabou. So let me back this up a second so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. Okay. If you use all that stuff, it's going to be pretty bulky right up here where we're going to be tying on. So I'll strip a little bit of that off. And then I'm going to kind of tease that back until I think I have about the length of my hook shank. Now I'm going to lay that right where I want to tie it in. I'm going to make 1 or 2 wraps and just let my bobbin hang, and I can eyeball it. If it's way too long, if you hang on to it, you can still pull it forward a little bit. But notice the length of that is just about the length of the shaft of the hook, okay? So if I've got as much on there as I want, I'm not going to have to adjust it. Then I'm going to cinch that in good. I'm going to cinch up to my lead, and I'm going to cut that surplus off right on top of the hook. Okay? And that end up is going to be waste. Now, if this kind of wants to flare up and get in your way, if you just moisten your fingertips, you can kind of keep it in place. I like to use some FLASHABOU on all of my woolies. I take the 2 strands and I make sure 2 ends are matched. Then I'm going to lay that against my marabou, and I want it about the length of the marabou, maybe just a tad longer. I'm going to hold that in place, and then with a couple easy wraps, I'm going to attach that on this side of the fly. Okay? Then I'm going to take that rest of that, I'm going to slip it over. I'm going to easy wrap it. I know I've got it attached on the other side. And then I'm going to get my scissors out and trim that. Oh, I can't get to it. Where's the other one? It's playing hide and seek with me. I'm going to, don't stretch these or it'll change the pattern of the sparkle. I'll clean that off. Okay. Then remember the rule, the last thing you're going to wrap forward is the first thing you tie on. The last thing we're going to be wrapping forward is your hackle. Now you should have some of this, I kind of like black hackle, it sets it off a little bit, but all this fuzzy stuff, I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, and I'm going to trim that, get it out of my way. And I'm going to go to the very fine tip, and I'm going to grab just the very tip of that, and then very carefully, I'm going to try and fold those individual barbs back. And I should have a tip here, and I'm going to tie that on, and I want a little bit of the stuff that leans, the stuff that doesn't lean backward. I want a little bit of the straight stuff right where I'm tying in, because that first wrap, it makes that first wrap a little bit easier. Then the last thing we're going to tie on is our chenille. And chenille is really neat stuff. If you strip the ends of it with your thumb, you will see that inside there are two little threads. And I'm going to tie those threads on the same spot, right above where the barb would be. Make sure that's attached. And then I'm going to bring my line forward. I'm going to half hitch that so it's not going to go anywhere. And I've got a bobbin rest. I'm going to get my bobbin out of the way. Now the next step is to take the chenille, and I'm going to wrap that forward. I want those wraps to be tight and right next to each other. So when you start wrapping hackle, the hackle has a tendency to follow the chenille wraps. And notice I'm leaving some tip there. I don't want to get it so far forward that I'm starting to crowd my eye. And I'm going to over and drop it 2 or 3 times so I know it's not going to go anywhere. And then very carefully, I'm going to cut that off on top of my hook. If you're ever going to cut the thread, this will be the time that you do it. If your thread is not buried down in the chenille, it happened to me just the other day when I was tying up a couple of these. So I'm going to make sure I've got a couple of insurance wraps there. And I'm going to half hitch this, and then I'm going to get my bobbin out of the way, and I'm going to get my hackle plier. I'm going to lift that hackle up, and I'm going to kind of wet this stuff just to make it sure it stays out of my way. And then I'm going to grab my hackle tip with my pliers. And let me back this up a little bit more. Okay, you can see I've got that in, and I'm going to wrap that. Notice all those barbs are facing me. You don't want it twisted. You don't want to start wrapping with it twisted. So I'm going to try and keep those barbs facing me, and I'm going to have to use my rotary vise because I don't have enough room here. You can do this by, I'll try to do it. I can't do it by hand. You want those wraps evenly spaced as you're wrapping them forward. And in the book it says when you get up to the top, you want an extra couple of wraps to form kind of a shell. I try to do that. And this is the tricky part. When you tie that off, you got to kind of weed it through. You don't want to trap any of those vertical hackles that you want in your fly pattern. So I'm going to drop that over, drop it 3 or 4 times. And then I'm going to try to very carefully, I'm going to try to trim just the center stem. Okay? Now, see all that hackle that's leaning forward? You have 2 choices. You can try to cut it off, which usually doesn't work real well, or you can try to grab that with your fingertips, pull that back, and grab it while it's leaning backwards, and make that part of your head. And that worked pretty well for me. And then you form your head. If you like a bigger head, fine. If you don't like a bigger head, that's fine. But when you're forming this head, you don't want to trap any of those little hackle barbs. And then you whip finish it. And I just don't have the room here. Dadgummit, a lot of the stuff that I put on unwrapped on me. I don't have this problem at home.
Get your bobbin out of the way.
Well, that's not my problem.
No, not your way. Camera.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. Now I'm going to use make sure I got it grabbed first before now it won't come unraveled on me, and I can use my whip finish tool to finish it up. 2, 3, 4, 5. You can put head cement on if you want, but it's been my experience that if you whip finish 4 or 5 turns, I've never had the head come unraveled. If you want it to look a little bit shinier, you can put some head cement on it, but there is a green olive woolly bugger, and they're really an effective fly. They will also work for brim. They will work for small bass if you're in an area where you got bigger bass. I've tried tying some of these on like a size, maybe an 8 hook for bass, and I've never caught one. But I just haven't used it that much. I'm sure they would work if I would stick to it. But that is a green olive woolly bugger.